Whatever happened to Earl Zalsmer's famous red BMW? It's right here. My name is Mike Mickney. Today is May 1st, 2022, and I purchased Earl's car and I'm in the process of rebuilding it. Here's a little bit of a story about how this all came to be and kind of the history in the past and looking into the future. I first heard this car, the system in this car, back in, I think it was 1995 or 94, at a sound off in Long Island, New York at Parkway Car Stereo. When the car pulled in, it had such a big crowd, you couldn't even tell the color of the car. There were so many people. And I went over to see what was going on. I was able to get a listen that day because Earl was amazing and always would demo his car. If you're listening to this and you're a competitor, you should also do the same. I would highly encourage it because it changed me as an audiophile. And I was able to hear the car. And at the time, I thought my car sounded pretty good. But I later that day didn't even turn my system on to listen to it after hearing this car. It blew me away. If you've ever heard the car, especially in its first iteration, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It literally imaged so well, you could reach out and touch the person. Holographic imaging. The soundstage was amazing, super deep. And just basically the most natural sounding system I've ever heard to date in any kind of a car, home, headphones, anything like that. And as soon as I heard that, I said, someday I want to have this kind of sound for myself. So at this point, I not only am going to strive for that sound, I'm doing it in the original car I heard it in. And again, I'm sure many of you can kind of echo the same experience from listening to this car. I think it was quite moving for a lot of people. I still remember, and I happen to have them here, even some of the CDs that I listened to the first time in the car. This track here, it's called Mojo. This was really, really good. One of the Maple Shade discs that Earl constantly was playing in the car. Also the Looney Tunes track off this album. So you can get a close-up there if you don't have it and you'd like to get it. It's a great album. And then here's another example, the Fairfield 4 with the singers. And this, especially the guy with the deep voice, I mean, it was incredible in the car. I've never heard something as real as that in a system, especially in a car. A little bit of history about me, just so you know who I am in case you, I'm not familiar with my name. My name, again, is Mike Mickney. And I've been around car audio for a long time. I started as an audiophile. Man, I can remember being 7 or 8 years old, listening to my dad's AKG K240 headphones with a turntable, listening to some vinyl, and, you know, listening to some really good recordings back in the day. I was probably 6, 7, 8 years old. My father was always an audiophile coming up, and my brother was big into sound as well. So those guys were two big influences on me that really kind of got me ultimately into car audio and all kinds of audio as well. I spent 20 years, let's go over here, in audio, and that's me, give you an idea, on the front cover of Mobile Electronics magazine. This is back in April of 2007. Spent over 20 years in 12 volt, and I owned a shop called Precision Mobile Audio in upstate New York, and that was 2005 to 2010. We were rated one of the top 50 retailers from this magazine from our peers. Thank you if you voted for us, appreciate it. I was also Rockford 2005 Dealer of the Year. I've since gotten out of the audio industry, probably, gosh, back almost 12 years ago now. We've been living out here in Arizona. And it's been better for me as far as this hobby goes because I am now back to being truly passionate about audio, being out of the industry. So I think that's made a big difference. I'm in the mortgage business now, something completely different. Also, you may recognize, here's a magazine from back in the day. This is I think this is August 2000 Car Audio magazine, happened to be the buyer's guide. And I had this car, which was on the competition circuit back from 97 to 99. And as you can see, I had Sony back then as well, Sony C90. deck. There's a controller, kick panels, and you may recognize the trunk there. Motorized drawer came out. This is the car that I had when I pulled up and listened to Earl's car that day. So this thing was no slouch, but not even in the same ballpark, not even close. So that again is kind of a little bit about me, my history. I've always been an audiophile. As I mentioned, my kids have always, I played drums for, gosh, several, I don't know, 20 years. Kids always played an instrument, so I've always been around music. Oh, and I actually happened right here. In a recent interview, Earl talked about custom in-ear monitors, headphones, and he basically got me into them. These things are really high-end. These are a little bit older now. I think they're about 5 or 6 years old, but they're made by a company called Noble Audio. These were custom molded to my ears. So you go to an audiologist, get a mold made. As you can see, they're this crazy shape. That's my ear. Inside of there, you can see the silver right there. There are 10 drivers. These things sound incredible. They're really good. They're really detailed. If you want to walk around, you know, the grocery store and have some good audiophile type quality, that's a good way to do it. Here's the, and I actually just plug them into the iPhone, and I'm using a little Dragonfly Cobalt DAC. And the sound is good. Nothing near what a car experience is. But it's still really good. So again, as you can see about me, I'm kind of a perfectionist despite my gross workbench. It gets used a lot. But I am all about sound, man. Whatever it takes to make it sound best is what matters to me. So, all right, a little bit more history about the car. And as you can see, it's kind of apart. We'll talk more about that in a couple of minutes. This car was purchased brand new by Earl back in 94. The car is on 94, or I think late 93 is when he bought it. He went through 2 different iterations of the builds. The car sold, I think, approximately 2000 when Earl moved out to Arizona, Scottsdale, Arizona from Pennsylvania. And after that, it changed hands several times. It's got a really kind of an interesting past. It went through, I think the guy that bought it from Earl was not paying the loan, and the car got repossessed and was stuck in a warehouse for a while and sat there for quite a while. After that, it changed hands several times. There was a Grammy award-winning artist that owned it. I believe that was Diana Ross's keyboard player. Several different people. Again, it changed hands a few times. Ultimately, it belonged to a couple. An older gentleman owned the car, and he was a big-time audiophile. He became very ill, and his wife reached out to Mike Milbert from Milbert Amplifiers and said, "Hey, I think you should have this car back." And so Mike Milbert bought the car, and that was, oh gosh, as far as I know, probably at least 15 years ago, 20 years ago. I made an attempt to buy the car about 7 years ago. That kind of just didn't manifest. And then a couple of years ago, we were able to get it done. And since, you know, the car is here. So let's see, I do have some notes I'm kind of following here for this. So that's basically, yeah, that's pretty much how I, you know, purchased the car, and a brief history of the past. Again, there were 2 versions of the car audio system that was built in this car. The first one was built by an installer named Henry Wernega. Henry is one of, if not the most gifted builders and meticulous people I know. He's incredible. He's no longer doing car audio. I think he still has systems in his vehicle, but I'm still passionate about sound, but has also moved out of the car audio industry. Henry built this car. A lot of you may remember it had 13-inch woofers in the fenders. The fenders opened up. More on that here in just a bit. It also had a pair of B&W 4-inch mid-range that motorized out of the dashboard. Henry literally machined the gears by hand out of, I believe, aluminum. Henry is a gifted machinist. I think his father was as well. And did all of that work. The car in that iteration sounded by far the best. After that, when Earl moved out, again, approximately in 2000 or 1999 maybe, Earl moved out to Arizona, which is where I am, and he had another shop install the the new system. He was using Nautilus drivers from Bowers and Wilkins at that point. I'm not here to talk ill of anyone, but that install did not hold a candle to the original install. And subsequently, the sound quality of the setup was nowhere near. That first setup was special. The stars aligned when that car was built, and my hope is to get it back there and kind of do it one better. Okay, very carefully. I know there's big shoes to fill there. All right. So again, that's kind of a little bit of a history about the car. A lot of people have been seeing some, Earl recently did an interview, and there's been a lot of people asking, hey, it'd be cool to find out more about the car, the history and what's going on with it at this point. My idea is, again, I'm going to do basically the same setup. I'm going to talk more about that here in just a bit. The same setup of the drivers is what Earl had. I'll go through and talk more specifically about each of those elements. But think of it as Earl and Henry getting together. I'm also involved, and it's like a +1. What can we do to make it better, right? Very carefully, because the last thing I want to do is have it come out any worse. If I could get the sound that I heard that first day at that sound off in Long Island, I would never need for anything else from an audio perspective. I could live with that forever, but hey, if we can make it better, let's do it, right? That's kind of where I'm at. To date, I've owned this car now. I bought it in August of 2020. I'm going to talk here in just a moment about what I've done, but I spent about 400 hours actually hands in the car. Gosh, probably at least double that, planning, coming up with ideas, listening, testing, so on and so forth. So over the last couple of years, I've been hard at work. I do have a really busy full-time job, so it's difficult for me to spend a substantial amount of time on the car, but I do what I can. One of the other great things is I live in Arizona. I'm in Mesa, Arizona. Feel free to stop by if you ever would like. I'd love to, especially once we get this thing up and going, I'd love to demo it. We'll talk more about that in a bit. But Earl lives in Scottsdale, Arizona, which is, I think, about 45 minutes away. So he will come over from time to time. He's actually coming over this afternoon. We're going to do some listening, testing, not in the car yet, but with some equipment. I'll show you here in just a bit. So that is kind of what's going on with Earl these days as well. Also, Milbert amplifiers. Michael Milbert is very involved in kind of the resurrection of this as well. He actually came up with a really cool name for the car, and we're calling it CarMiZa, M-I-Z-A. M-I for the first two initials of my last name, Mickney, and Z-A, obviously, for Zausmer. So it's kind of a collaboration of the two of us. So again, if you go on Milbert's website, it's www.milbert.com, M-I-L-B-E-R-T. You'll see a lot of different information about the car there as well. Not only just what's going on with the new stuff, but a great deal of pictures and information about the history of the car. Okay, so that's kind of helpful. When I purchased the car, let's go over here and take a look at this. When I initially purchased the car, I got with it some really cool stuff. So many people have been messaging me like, oh my gosh, is there any other pictures of the car? Because there's not a ton. There's just the magazines it was in. In the future, guys, I will go through and scan all of these and show all of you all this goodness. So in terms of car audio history, it's pretty epic. Whoop, that was a bikini contest apparently at a sound off. But you can see there are hundreds of pictures in this box. Not only that, some of the other things, this is the original tube, big old 845 that Earl had in the trunk. That's going to obviously go back in. I'll talk more about the trunk in a bit. And even things like this, these are the original things that Earl had made, laminated kind of posters about the builds that he had in the car when he competed, and these came with it. So again, a little bit more car audio history here, which I think is really cool. And just some other things you can see. These are even the gold straps that go on. More on those in a little bit. The gold-plated Milbert BAM 235 amplifiers. All right, going on from there, let's take a look at the car and talk about kind of where it's at right now. So as you can see, I got the fenders off right now. I'll go over the woofer setup in just a bit. Let's talk about the interior of the car. What interior, right? So here's essentially what I did. When I purchased the car, my objective was to pull the car down until I got to a point where there was nothing that was basically had any imperfections, right? If it was wiring, upholstery, dynamat, anything like that. Like if there's an issue, it comes out of the car and it gets redone, period. No questions asked, right? So basically, as you can see, that left me with effectively gutting the car, okay? I'm going to share, I may share it with everyone, or if you want to DM me on Facebook, maybe your email address, I can share a Google Drive that I have of pictures and videos of what I've done over the last 2 years of the car. There's several hundred, gosh, probably over 1,000 pictures, tons of like real short, like 1-2 minute videos. The wiring in this car, when I got it, was a mess. And that was based on not Henry at all. Henry did a great job. It was all of the people after him that just got in and, I'll use the term, molested the car. So at this point, in terms of the wiring, like even for example, this right here, you couldn't even see that those relays or anything like that because it was just a rat's nest of wires. I've spent, believe it or not, it may not look it, 140 hours redoing the wiring so far in the car. Basically, all I've done is gotten it sorted. In the little teaser here, in the kick panel, and don't mind the mess, basically there were Molex plugs for these harnesses that got in the way of when Earl would try to remove and install new woofers if you had to service the woofers. So I have gone through, bypassed all of those Molex plugs. Right now, everything is just kind of up it together and working. Believe it or not, may not look it, but a couple of weekends ago, I had the car running. I checked everything mechanically, or excuse me, electrically. Everything works perfectly. The only thing I have is the driver's mirror was not working. Turns out the motor's bad in the mirror. The car is a 94. So it may look a mess right now, but trust me, I know every single harness, where everything is, what it's doing. The tape that you see on here is just temporary. What I'm doing is just, again, get everything sorted, get it all figured out, get it all functioning properly. From here, I'm going to go through and using Tessa tape, 9mm Tessa tape, which is the same thing that BMW used when the car came down the assembly line, basically go through and retape all of these wires. So when I'm done with this, everything will be properly mounted and all OEM wiring will be exactly as it was from the beginning. To give you a quick idea, here is the HVAC box for the car. I have restored this. I spent 17 hours, I think, just on this box. Cleaning it, going through, and this wiring I have completed. If you look at this, you can see this has all been redone, okay? Even did a drop of super glue on the end of each piece of Tessa tape to make sure it does not come unglued or anything like that. This is exactly the way it was done from the factory, verbatim. Okay, exactly the same, even the same types of zip ties in the same location. The heads of the zip ties were up. I've paid incredible attention to detail, okay? All right, so that's kind of the interior of the vehicle, where it's at right now. The next moves here, the car's got a lot of, the whole car is going to be redone in terms of paint and everything like that. There's a lot of, you can't really see it. And the paint looks decent for the fact that it's a 94. Earl had it completely redone before he sold the car. But it has not been well taken care of. So it needs to be completely redone. I'm going to dynamat the car once the wiring is done. Shout out to Michael at Dynamat. As you can see, I removed all of the old dynamat. This car had, guys, I had buckets and buckets and buckets of dynamat that I pulled out of the car. It was the original dynamat, the actual first stuff they came out with, which was asphalt based, and it was kind of peeling. It wasn't holding up. So again, if it's not perfect, that comes out, it gets redone. So I will be going through after the wiring is done and re-dynamating the entire car, basically the same way Earl had, with cases upon cases of dynamat, okay? All right, let's talk about, I'm gonna walk around here. And as you can see, I've got the grill out because been working on the fender area. Spent a bunch of time in that. I'll go over that in just a bit. The trunk doesn't look like much at all right now, but what I want to show you, you can just see I just got stuff just sitting in here. Those, just a couple of Zapcos, these 600 sitting there. Here's some of the original metalwork that Henry did. This stuff needs to be refinished, which I will have done, but my intent is to reuse as much of the original, especially this stuff, right? The stuff that he built. You can't buy this, guys. Like, this is all custom hand built by like a true craftsman. Okay, so as far as the trunk goes, my intent is to redo this to be the same way that Earl had it. And you can see he had the carpet that was mounted. I'm going to redo all of this because it's done incredibly well for almost 30 years that it's been sitting there, but it needs to be redone because, again, it's not perfect. I don't know if you can see it in here. I don't want to put way back there. See that? That's the original wood that Earl had in there as well. So that will stay. I'm going to refinish that. But again, the look of the trunk at this point, I think, is going to be virtually identical to what he had last, where it was the two Milbert amplifiers, the Sony changer, and then, you know, all of the carpet. It looks, I'll tell you, no disrespect to anybody these days with new systems, but this interior, the trunk, I think was timeless, right? Super classy, very different, very unique with the gold amplifiers, the diachronic lighting. I mean, it was just super amazing, I think. So there's definitely, I'm very nostalgic, so I'm trying to maintain as much of that original, you know, hey, what did Earl do type thing. I'm not looking to completely reinvent the wheel. All right, let's see. That should cover all of that. Let's talk next about this setup. What do we got going on here? So basically what this is, let me set my notes down. So it's been almost coming up on year and a half, almost 2 years that I've owned the car. I'm a long way from really being able to sit there and listen to it, right, as you can tell. So I wanted to be able to do two things. I wanted to be able to sit down and do some listening every once in a while. And also, very important, I wanted to do a lot of testing. I want to test some different, I was trying different drivers, Earl and I were, and we kept going back to these same drivers. I also want to test the Sony Z50 changer and processor compared to other units. I doubt I'm going to like anything else better, but there's the fundamentals of this entire build. Whatever sounds best goes in the car. All right, so let's talk about some of the specifics of what we got on here. Let me see, I'm just going to grab a seat here. These are the original drivers, not the exact drivers, but the original model of drivers that Earl had in the car. This is just it's pretty cool, right? It's a metal cup that came with these tweeters when I bought them, but that just happens to fit very perfect to protect these. These are the Bowers & Wilkins Silver Signature tweeters. If you're not familiar with these came on the SS25 from Bowers & Wilkins, which were a very limited production run. Those speakers, basically in a nutshell, were started when John Bowers, the founder of Bowers & Wilkins, was still alive. He had passed away, and the story goes that they kind of, the design of those speakers just kind of got shoved away in a corner, and then the engineers realized, wait a minute, we need to do something special to recognize John after he passed away. So they finished the Silver Signatures, and they were a kind of an homage to John Bowers. There were no expenses spared. So the original setup was this tweeter and a 6.5-inch driver. Every part of the audio path of the speakers was made from silver. All the voice coils, all the wiring, the crossovers. Little cool fun fact, this crosshair is made of silver. Okay, pretty cool. So these are really special tweeters. These are, again, the same ones that Earl had. You can see the coax design. When I do the final install, that tweeter will be a little bit closer to the mid. But that is the magic of one of the magic aspects of the car's sound, right? It was coaxially mounted like this, so you had a single point source. He was playing the mids, which is the same as I'll do, 198 hertz and up, crossing the tweeters at around 3K. So you basically have, call it 200 hertz on up, all coming from a single point source, all right? The tweeters took me, in case if you're like, hey, cool, I'll grab some of those. I certainly invite you to try to find some because they're incredible. Took me 10 years to find this pair of tweeters. If you notice, the dome is blue. If you notice over here on this one, it's also blue. It matches. When they built these tweeters, I guess something happened with it's an aluminum dome tweeter. They kept having production issues in terms of supply. So basically these tweeters can be anywhere from a regular aluminum look to this blue look. To get a pair and everything in between, right? I've seen them all different shades of blue, if you will, right? So in order to get a pair that matches, it took me 10 years. I also have a pair of backup diaphragms in the event that I need them. But again, these tweeters are incredible, very, very special. The mid-range drivers, these are out of the Bowers & Wilkins Matrix 801s. These are going back, guys, to like the early 90s. And they actually started with this driver in 1982 in the Series 80. Again, this was an original John Bowers design. Earl knows the guy's name, the original engineer. His name escapes me right now, but there was one engineer who really kind of voiced the speakers, a main engineer. And I'm not sure if the guy's still with us, but these things are amazing. They're about a 4.5-inch driver. Earl and I tried, you name it, every other kind of Bowers & Wilkins driver against these things. We went and listened to all the new stuff, the new diamonds, all of that. No thanks. There was nothing that held a candle to these. They're incredibly revealing, yet the most natural, warm sounding speaker. These are true British sound, where I think a lot of the new Bowers & Wilkins are more of an American sound. And for me personally, maybe that's what you like. I don't want a, clinical, sterile. They're very detailed, the new stuff, maybe, and certainly more so than these, but to me, they don't sound real. These sound incredible, all right? Let's see. And as far as the mids go, if you go on to, it's called Compass, I think, where you can get B&W parts, they show that they still have these in stock. I don't believe that's the case. I have 12 and a half pair. I got 13 of these things, including a pair that are brand new in the box and never used. These are not those. These are kind of a test pair. So they're in really good shape. Another thing that happens with the mids too is because they're Kevlar and they're not treated, they can turn brown over time. Again, these things are from the early 90s. So it's not uncommon. I've got some that are as brown as this enclosure. They're really dark, but I'll tell you, they sound great. All right, so that's about the mids. Let's talk next about the woofers and again, these are the same drivers that Earl had in the car for the first time. So this is the grill. This is the original grill from the Bowers & Wilkins 801 speakers. If you notice, when I pull this off, there are these pins on the back of this grill, and that's what holds the grill on. And then it's missing a couple of grommets here, but there are rubber grommets that hold in the woofer itself that actually hold the grill on. When I install these in the car, my grill will utilize, I'm gonna build a frame basically using this as a starting point, right? I'm not gonna actually use these because these are very, very valuable. I'll probably just hold on to them or sell them or whatever. But I'm gonna mock up using the same kind of material, and I'm gonna do 4 pins, and my grill will remove. It'll also be covered with either grill cloth or some kind of a thin cloth material. If you listen to Earl's recent interview, as good as his car sounded with these in the kick panels, he only had a small opening for the sound to come out of. Otherwise, they were solid. And in talking with him, this is an example of, the +1. What can we do to make the car better? There will be completely no restrictions on the output of these drivers acoustically. They will not be inhibited by any kind of a grill like that, right? So a couple of other things with the drivers. Earl calls them a 13-inch. They actually measure closer to 12 inches. This series, to get this actual model number, these are extremely rare. These only came in the B&W 801 Series 3. This had a little bit bigger motor structure than a lot of the other ones. But one of the other things, check this out. When you tap on this thing, I'm just barely putting pressure on this. Look at how quick that suspension is. The suspension is extremely loose. The car uses Zapco solid state amplifiers for the woofers, one for each woofer, and thank God they have the dampening. Earl tried a whole bunch of different amplifiers, and the Zapco is the only one that had the dampening to be able to control this woofer properly, and it really made a big difference. All right, let's take a look. Now that we looked at the woofers, let's talk a little bit more about the kick panel area. Let me get my stool here, self-comfortable. So a couple of things, well, several things with the woofer area. So if you remember seeing this in car audio and electronics, there was a good shot. It was kind of like this. That showed the woofer. However, I've done some different things. So far, as you can see, I opened this hole up. By this, I don't think I extended this at all, but this I opened up a bit. This area, you can see where I re-welded this. And basically just opened up the whole area a bit more. Just to make sure there's no impediment as far as airflow with the woofer itself. Plus, I wanted to be able to see more of the woofer when the fender is out of the way. As you can see, there is some amazing welding work done. Shout out to James Abram, who is my future son-in-law, and he did all of the welding in the car. I've done everything else myself. I tried doing some welding, and I've done a bunch of welding in the past, but this guy is a master, all right? Let me get a flashlight. You got to see this. This is an example of if it could be done better, and if I wasn't able to do it better, do it better. Look at this. Look at the weld there. Look at that seam. So that's basically the work that he did. So this is also when Henry built the car, another example of kind of a plus one. It was about 1/8 of an inch steel plate that was welded throughout the car, and it was solid. It was really nice. I decided to go a bit thicker. This is 1/4 inch plate steel. And as you can see, it is welded on from both sides all the way around and tapped. You can see right there where it's tapped for the bolts for the woofers. And then there's the hole. This would be an example of the hole for the pin for the grill that I talked about. So it's already prepped just to make sure it can go through the woofer and into that the baffle. Looking to the inside, this is actually a pretty good angle here. If we look at the passenger side, these are all done, guys. I could put woofers in here if I wanted to at this point. But again, I need a dynamat and do all of that. But as you can see, these are extremely solid, very well done, I think. And if you look at how far they stick out, they don't. They're basically completely flushed in. So this is going to allow for a large, woofer, 13-inch, to be flushed into the kick panel. And again, you can imagine the grill on there. Nothing sticks into the cabin area at all. And most importantly, this maintains exactly the same setup that Earl had the first time. Basically just a plus one. All right, next thing is the fenders. Let's talk about that. If you remember, Earl had the fender set up, which is right over there. There's one of them. The other one's underneath the car. But Earl had the fender set up where he could go along, open the hood, pull these bolts out, and the fender would hinge open so that you could see the woofer, which was, I remember seeing that. I was freaked out. I said, you've got to be kidding me. Nobody did anything even remotely like that. We're talking about a brand new car that him and Henry just started cutting big holes in. That's pretty crazy, right? This is groundbreaking and still is, I think, today. My effort, as far as the hinge fender goes, I liked it. I like the idea. But when it was opened, you only had a little bit of a viewing area. right? So here's what I'm doing, and you got to work with me here. I have, as you can see, I've got all of this prepped and ready to go. This is one of the next things I'll be doing as well. So I have all of the metal mocked up for this, but I also wanted to make kind of a model to see how this was going to work. Bear with me here. I did have to sacrifice a Corona box for this. Imagine this is the car, and like here, and this is the fender. You're going to pull off the bolts, or I may do something even cooler there, possibly motorized, we'll see. But the fender is now going to move forward like this. The woofer would be right here. So now you'll have an unobstructed view and be able to see the entire thing. What'll look cool, and these arms, by the way, are 10 inches long. So the fender ends up sliding out quite a ways forward of the car. So it's going to look wild when those things are open. And this will be the case on both sides. When you're done viewing it, you close it up and you're good to go. One of the other things I'm doing, actually, let's go over and take a quick look at that. +1, right? So I'm going to take the fender. I have the fender. If you notice, I got a collection of other fenders here. I have 2 other fenders for each side. Each of these fenders, the spare fenders, are going to be cut back so that I'm cutting back the majority of this perimeter, and I'm going to laminate these fenders onto this fender, the original fender. So basically the fender will have a thickness that is 3 times what it currently is. That again is going to make it stronger, more solid. The other thing I'm doing is, if you notice, these fenders are off a 95 5 Series BMW, and they had a reflector, right? That's where the reflector goes. But this car, Earl's car is a 94, does not have the reflector. I'm going to carefully cut a hole for the reflector. The reflector will not function. It's going to be held in place by a magnet. You pull that off, and there's a bolt, another bolt that's right here, that goes through and holds the fender in place, because the woofer is right here. So that's where it's most likely to resonate and flex. That's going to get a lot more stability and, again, improve the sound quality of the system. All right. Let's see. Where do my notes go here? All right. So that's talking about the woofer area, the fenders. Next, let's talk about source. So this is currently the Sony Z50, which is really rare, amazing setup out of the car. This is where the display goes, tuner pack, rotary commander, and then that's the business end right there. This setup, for nostalgia purposes, I would like to maintain this, but I'm only going to do this if it's what sounds best. In my listening with headphones, spinning CD sounds better than downloaded or stored media. I don't want to start any kind of a war here, but to me, I can totally hear a difference. And what sounds best is a spinning CD. That's just my opinion. That's just what I have found. So unless I can find something that does better, this is what's going in the car. Also, a lot of people look at this piece and say, yeah, it's awesome. It's in one of the, maybe one of the best CD players out there, next to some of the Pioneer ODR, Alpine F1. The stuff's incredible. But the processor's crap, right? The crossover points are horrible. And it's only got a 12-band EQ. So when Earl had the original setup with the ES system in the car, that had I believe it's a 10-band EQ on the original P1 X1. Guess what? He was using 6 bands only. And those were very minor adjustments. The car did not need a ton of EQing, right? So I'm not worried about EQ. With 12 bands of EQ is plenty. Also, the crossover points on this piece are actually perfect for this setup. This woofer, one of the magic parts of this car, unlike a lot of cars, it's very unique. Earl played this woofer from nothing up to 198 hertz. So that's the crossover point on the Z50, and it actually sounded incredible. He recently told me he tried lowering it down to 98 hertz or 99 hertz, and then the mids played fine still, even though they're a smaller mid. But the car just got super thin sounding. when you listen to something with, you know, like a deep male vocalist, this woofer, this 13-inch woofer, really adds a lot of bottom, a lot of warmth and just fullness to the bottom of the vocal, right? So that is a key component. So again, my point here is that these would normally be bad crossover points for many people in many systems, but for this car, it's perfect. So again, unless I can find something better, this Z50 is what's going to go in the car. Again, I will do a +1. I plan on doing additional changers. I have some cool things slated there. I would love to be able to figure out ultimately a way to be able to do native DSD with a processor, but Car Audio hasn't gotten to that yet. Neither has anybody else in audio, but maybe someday. All right, let's see. Let me check my notes here. I think that covers. Oh, one other thing too. If any manufacturers are listening to this, or anybody who has units that they're like, boy, I love a Z50. I wonder if my, you know, XYZ processor is better. If anybody wants to send me any units, I will be, you know, you can trust me, and I would gladly test this against anything you've got. I would love to hear something. If it's better, it goes in the car, period, right? So, you know, I know that a lot of people like the Helix, the Zapco, the Sony GS9, so on and so forth. But I can't imagine something sounding better than this, but I would love to get some different pieces and give it a test. All right, let's talk next about Milberts. One of the other key pieces, this car would have never sounded the way it sounded without these. If you're not familiar, these are made by Milbert amplifiers, Michael Milbert, and basically they are a David Burning EA230 original design that has a power supply that allows them to be used in the car. There are no microphonics, no issues whatsoever. These amplifiers Earl had originally the BAM 230s, and then these went in the car. These are the BAM 230 AB auto bias. And these have been in the car forever. Michael, before I bought the car, pulled them out of the car, brought them in, benched them, replaced the tubes, checked them, and guess what? They were perfect. There's no issues whatsoever. I cannot explain the difference that these amplifiers make in terms of warmth, accuracy, just a very smooth, natural sound. If you've heard tube amps, you know what I'm talking about. The gold plating is something that Earl had done, including these covers over the transformers. That will be polished. I don't think I'm going to have to redo it. There's a couple of areas that look a little bit suspect, but I think I can get everything polished and get them 100%. Those are a non-negotiable in terms of what goes in the car. Don't mind I don't want people picking on me. This is just temporary, this listening rig. This thing is just an old Alpine deck, temporary until I get the Z50 back. I'm jonesing over here. I want to listen to some good music, all right? And Earl's coming over later to some listening as well. All right, so Milbert amplifiers, again, check them out if you have not seen them. I don't think that there is a better sounding amplifier for mid-range and tweeters. So basically the way it's set up, it's an active setup, always has been, always will be. 1 amp runs the tweeters, 1 amp runs the mids. So these retail for about $5,000 a piece, and that's separate of the gold plating if you're interested in contacting Milbert to find out more about those. All right, let's see. Some of the other things, the dashboard, when I go to build the dash in the car, I am not going to motorize the mids. I'm going to let that rest with Henry. I think that was such an incredible thing that he came up with that that's part of his magic. I'm going to let that go, and I'm not going to try to duplicate that. Instead, I plan on making the dash. And one thing with that, you know, Earl and I were talking, and Earl's confident that the car will sound better making a much larger open area below the driver. So it'll look similar, but I'm going to rebuild the entire dash. There could be some, I'm looking at different materials in terms of how to deaden the dash, lead buckshot, concrete, different things like that. And then ultimately I'm going to thermo vacuum form, building my own setup for that to be able to wrap the entire dashboard. So it'll look similar to what it looked like before. And again, having these incredible looking mid-range and tweeters. I just think those things look like artwork to me. So in terms of wiring, if you remember, the car had straight wires, and that will be the case going forward as well. Steve Hill is still involved in the build as well, and it will be assisting from straight wires. So Earl and I will be getting some new test products from them, going through and doing some testing and listening. Let's see. As far as lighting goes, again, I'm going to use the same exact lighting that Earl had. But, you know, I'm going to also, it's that diachronic, kind of a amber color. You can't duplicate it with LED. I bought a bunch of lights and tried stuff because I'm having trouble finding the lenses. I think I found them. Nothing else looks the same. Especially in the trunk with the gold amps and everything. It was just so warm and natural looking. And again, no disrespect to what people are doing these days, but it seems like everybody's doing white LED. And to me, it looks kind of like a lot of the new product sounds. Stark, harsh, not comfortable, not warm, right? That's what I'm after for this whole thing. All right, let's see what else. Mechanically, as you can see, I got a set of wheels here. These are the original. They're in rough shape. I got to have them completely redone, but they're BMW M parallel wheels. They're original OEM. If I put those on the car, I'll get them redone, completely redone. The car currently has the 17-inch Racing Dynamics that Earl had on it original. Well, one of the pairs. He had the 3-spoke Anteras. No, Earl, I'm not doing those, I don't think. He also had a set of deep dish Racing Dynamics, and then these ultimately are what were on the car. So not sure yet. I'd like some opinions. Also, if you notice, the car is a 94. If you know these E34 BMWs, in 94, the bottom of the car was black. See that black trim? And then in 95, they did an actual, kind of a plastic rocker panel that was body matched to the same color, in this case, red. And then it would be red on the bottom of the rear bumper there as well. And then the front would be red as well instead of the black. I'm kind of interested in people's opinions. Should I leave it the way Earl had it with the same wheels and the same black along the bottom and just refinish the wheels, or do a little bit more of a, I won't call it newer because the car's a 94, but an upgraded look where I do the M parallels and then I do the body molding the same color as the car. Mechanically, here's a few parts. So basically, in a nutshell, what I did is I bought a parts car. I gutted it and I took it had a really good interior. The interior out of Earl's car was pretty rough, marginal as to whether or not it could be saved. The carpet, as you know, with the 15s in there, that had to be replaced. So I bought this other car and I harvested all of the interior out of it, the fenders, the wiring. And then this, as you can see, is just a box of tons of different parts and things like that. So I've got a ton of stuff here. Also mechanically, you can see like there's a set of coilovers down there. I went through and I ordered everything mechanically needed to get the car 110%. The motor in the car and the transmission were replaced by Earl. Well, not by Earl, but by the dealership. Shortly before he sold the car under a dealer, there was a BMW recall. And so the car only has 82,000 miles on it. Excuse me. And I think it probably had 60,000 when the motor, and transmission were replaced. So the bones are good there. I did I could show you that actually. I did a compression test. I've got it apart right now because I've got the HVAC box out of the car. I did start pulling some of it apart. The car does, if I put it back together, the wiring, it would run. But it needs, obviously it's not really been properly maintained. So I'm going to replace every gasket that there is, plugs, all filters, so on and so forth, and go through it. I've got everything to do with the brakes. I've got all new lines. Rebuilding the calipers, I've got rotors, pads, so on and so forth. Every single suspension part will be replaced. The car, when it's done, will ride and look like brand new. as I mentioned, I'm going to be repainting the car. I've done a little bit of paint work in the past, and I would love to do as much as possible myself. So I may do all the prep work and see if I could rent a good booth and then shoot the car myself. We'll see. Either that or I'll just have someone do it. But either way, it'll come out as good as possible, right? And again, you look at it on the video, I'm sure it looks pretty good, but it's not. It's got a lot of dings and there's a bunch of chips and things like that. All right, let's see. One of the last things here, kind of wrapping up, and give me just a second here. I want to kind of give a shout out to certain people. Obviously, hang on just a second here. There's been a lot of people over the years that have influenced me when it comes to car audio. I've been out of the industry and out of competing for better part of almost 15 years now, but yet here I am. I'm spending a lot of time. I don't care about the money part of it. You know, I could be doing other things with my time, but I'm going to spend a lot of time on this. I've already spent a lot of time on this, redoing this car. And over the years, there's been a lot of people in car audio that really have kind of made a difference and led me to where I am today. So in no particular order, kind of some shout outs here. Michael Arsenal, Jamie Perkins, Steve Hubbs, Gary Biggs, Manville Smith, Steve Head, John Whitledge, Peter Lafrano, Mark Eldridge, Mike Minio, Clifton, just recently met him, Kim Kohler, Paul Von Felt, Brian Sherman, Mark Fukuda, Ron Trout, Tony Candela, Larry Chisner, Uncle Larry, Asawendo, we're talking about people now out of the country, Derek Kenny. One of the coolest things I ever saw in car audio was a set of EQTs behind motorized taillights. How cool can you get? How much cooler can you get than that? Scott Buwalda, David Fiore from Animere Electronics, David Kennedy, David Navoni, Richard Clark. AutoSound 2000 taught me so much, guys, about proper, the theories and all of the important things that really made a difference over the years. Mike Eckley, Jason Digos. I'm sure there's a bunch of people I'm missing. A couple of people who unfortunately are no longer here, but really had a big influence. Frank Monahan, Turtle Man, and also Mike Foote. Very good. I Ask a Judge from the Northeast area. Taught me a lot. The main people that I really want to kind of thank for inspiring me and getting me to this point in the build, my dad, my brother, as I mentioned earlier, my family for putting up with me, my wife and 3 lovely kids. And I can't wait for them to hear this thing once it's done, whenever that happens. Mike Milbert for selling me the car. Thank you, Mike. Henry Wernega for basically inspiring me and kind of setting that footwork where I'm going to take over from here. And I won't do you wrong, bud. I will make sure it comes out 100%. And obviously, finally, to Earl for basically ruining me. If it wasn't for him, his ideas coming up with this car and seeing this build through, I wouldn't be standing here right now doing this, right? There's just something special about that sound, and I will have it. All right, so wrapping up here, some other things. Let's see. I know people are going to ask me, or I have been asked about the car. What is the timeline? What do you, people are asking me, hey, you're going to be at, this show next year or whatever. I don't know. I will tell you that when I'm done, I'm done. And when I'm done, I'm going to be able to say I could not have done it any better. I'm in no hurry, although I want the thing to be done and I'd love to have the sound, right? But it took me, I've been wanting this sound for almost 30 years. And if I need to wait another year or more, so be it. That's fine. I'm okay with that. Am I going to compete? Currently, the answer is no. I have no plans on competing, although I was an avid competitor for many, many years back in the day. And here's the simple reason. I don't want it to taint my interest. When I was competing, I felt that I was more interested in beating the other guy and getting points for finals and all of that I was truly sitting and enjoying the sound. That's the reason for this car being rebuilt. So who knows if things will change in the future. But I really don't have any interest in competing. I'll be glad to go to shows, even if I got to do a little driving, take, some long weekends and go and just be on display and just one after the other, let people hear this car. The reason I'm doing this and the reason this car is here is because that's exactly what Earl did the first day I went and looked at it. Just like many of you, he would share this thing and play it loud and get it, where it felt like it was going to tear your head off right before the judges came in to judge him. He didn't care. He wanted to, and he was more interested in people enjoying the sound than he was competing. That's exactly, I'm kind of taking right over the exact same theory there. So no huge interest in compete. I'm not doing this to compete at all. Again, I'll mention if you're in the Arizona area, I'm in Mesa, Arizona, just outside of Phoenix. So if you want to come out, even get a listen to this little rig here. It sounds incredible. Or, see the car, talk car audio, whatever. More than happy to have anyone stop by at any point. I will be providing updates on the build as we go. I do have a Google Drive with, like I mentioned, 1,000 pictures, videos of everything that I did from literally the day it came off the trailer when I bought the car. So if you want to DM me on Facebook, again, my last name is Michne, Michne. And if you want to send me a message with your email, I'll be happy to share the Google link so that you have access to the drive. I don't know. Maybe somebody could let me know. I don't know if there's any risk of me just posting that and opening it up to everyone. I'm glad to do that. I just want to make sure I don't get hacked or anything like that. So, and finally, the last couple things. Again, I want to make sure people know to visit the Milbert website to find out more about their amplifiers and also about the history of the car. It's www.milbert.com. And finally, if you are interested in this car, like I am, if you're not aware, Earl did an interview a little while back that Acknowledgements Clifton was kind enough to post recently. So if you have not yet, be sure to check that out. That'll give you more detail about this amazing history of this car and basically what got it here today. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you share the same passion that I do about sound, and hopefully someday you'll be able to get a listen to this thing just like me. Thanks very much. Take care.